Welcome to Dialogue this week. In this corner, we invite guests from in and out of Korea to talk about a wide variety of issues ranging from culture and sports to the latest trends around the world. Now, in our previous episodes, we touched upon many Korean TV series that have topped the charts on Netflix. More recently, the zombie thriller All of Us Are Dead has maintained its place on the top spot in terms of hours spent watching the series for 3 consecutive weeks, and it also ranked third among non-English TV shows that were most watched. But rather than focusing on a single show, today we want to touch upon a relatively new genre that leaves viewers in awe: zombies. As many of us might know, this is not the first time zombie-related dramas have gained so much popularity. To name a few, director Yeon Sang-ho's 2016 film Train to Busan and the 2019 Netflix series Kingdom, set in the Joseon Dynasty, were also well-loved by Koreans and also viewers from overseas. So why is the world so amused by zombie-related content, and are zombies even real? To answer our questions on zombies, we are joined by Dr. Cameron A. Carlson, spokesperson for the Zombie Research Society, who's also a doctor of public health, and our go-to film critic, Jason Bejervaise, both via Skype. Welcome to our show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Now let's start with Dr. Carlson. From what I understand, most of us acknowledge that zombies are completely fictional characters brought to light by George Romero's legendary film Night of the Living Dead in 1968. And even in the latest popular Netflix series, We're All Dead, the zombie virus was created by a science teacher's experiment that went wrong. So how does the Zombie Research Society see these beings?
So we see the zombies as more of an analog for the worst case scenario. They're human organisms that by either physical or biological means have come back to life and now possess just the basal instincts and a very small amount of brain activity, and they live to do the basal instinct, and that is to feed. So we kind of see them as the worst case scenario, and we can tie them into everything.
So, and also, I also want to ask, in many films, we commonly see zombies infecting the human population by biting them. So first, I want to ask, what triggers them to bite humans?
So what causes them to trigger to bite humans is, like I mentioned before, it's that instinct to just feed. It's the basic of instincts. It's the one thing that allows you to survive other than drinking water. So that instinct is to just, if anything comes up that's not a zombie, that they're going to eat it. So they just want to, bite, and that's all they do. They just kind of wander around, and if something comes in, they want to eat it, and that's why they bite.
So speaking of biting, is it their saliva or blood through the puncture that spreads the infection?
Yeah, so it's kind of, you can think of it almost as like the way a vampire transmits vampirism. A zombie, in order to transmit it, has to bite you. Now, that's a little bit of difference in, if you look at different cultural references like movies, sometimes it's getting the blood in your eyes, such as 28 Days Later, that movie. That's one way it can be transmitted. So it really depends on what kind of movie and what kind of time period that you're looking at. But the way that we look at it is it's a bite from a zombie that turns another person into one.
All right. Now let's turn to Jason. So K-zombies are popular right now because of the Netflix series We're All Dead. But as I've mentioned, there was also the Netflix series Kingdom, the movie Train to Busan, and its sequel Peninsula. So exactly, when and how did zombies start being a part of the Korean screen culture?
Well, they've been around, I guess, since the 1980s. One of the first Korean films featuring zombies was released in 1981, Gang Nong-goo's Monstrous Corpse. But it wasn't really until 2016 with Yeon Sang-ho's Train to Busan that zombies in Korean films became immensely popular. There was also #Alive that was released in 2020. There's Yeon Sang-ho's sequel Peninsula, and of course Kingdom. There's also the film Rampant that was released in 2018, starring Hyun-bin. It wasn't that popular, but certainly zombies in Korea are a big draw for audiences. I think if you look at some of the successful Hollywood films that have been released in Korea, not least World War Z that was released in 2013 that sold over 5 million tickets. Warm Bodies was released the same year. So I think Yoon Sang-ho saw an opportunity there and thought, well, clearly zombies do have a box office draw, so why not feature a lot of zombies in my film? And there's also 28 Days Later that Dr. Carlson mentioned, Danny Boyle's British film, was released in 2002. That's long had quite a lot of affection amongst cinephiles here, and there's also the Walking Dead series as well. So certainly I think the zombies in films and series, I think the ones that have really struck a chord with audiences came from overseas initially, and then Yoon Sang-ho's Train to Busan, the popularity of that both locally and overseas has certainly had an effect in terms of the amount of content we see featuring zombies.
Well, so it has been there for decades now. But so Dr. Carlson, now I want to make time for a comparison. So it seems like we see a significant difference in the characterization of zombies on screen. The so-called Western zombies are more lethargic, while these K-zombies are rather very active. Can you tell us about the different kinds of zombies?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Western zombies that you're talking about originate from the 1968 film from George Romero. That's how we all saw it. That's how it came out. That's kind of all the historical references to zombies. That's the way they're portrayed. They meander around. They're slow. You see them in The Walking Dead. It's not until much later on in the late 90s, early 2000s with the Resident Evil movies come out that you're actually starting seeing, the K zombies that we're talking about, the fast movers. In the K zombies, those have become much more prevalent because they're much more terrifying. So World War Z, Train to Busan, Zombieland, all of those in the more recent time frame, those have become the more prevalent ones because they're more exciting, they're more terrifying, they move quick, they're the main threat. So that's kind of where we're seeing the evolution go from the 1968, the Ramblers, to now the Sprinters.
Then what about you, Jason? So from the films you've watched, what characteristics would you say are unique to K-zombies?
Well, certainly they're very active. I remember watching the All of Us Are Dead trailer, and I was just really struck by how fast these zombies were moving. And I think if you look at Korean filmmakers and the way they've been influenced by American films and directors, they tend to, on the one hand, emulate their styles. So we have this zombie genre. But on the other hand, they try to do something new. So, and often the way they do that is to tackle local themes. And it's been interesting to see how these local themes are actually universal themes. So this idea of capitalism, this very competitive culture, and you certainly see that play out in All of Us Are Dead. It also plays out very well within the confinements of a train in Train to Busan. And so I think directors are very conscious of the fact that they are influenced by Hollywood cinema, but they want to do something new and try to tailor it towards local audiences. And I think that's one of the reasons why we see these zombies incredibly active.
So Jason, what about the latest Netflix series, All of Us Are Dead? Was there anything different about the zombies there? Was it the zombies or something about the series that captivated international audiences?
Well, I think the fact that it's set in a school is quite interesting. I think if you look at the zombie genre, I think it does tend to attract kind of younger crowds. And it reminded me of the Whispering Corridors films. These are the films that were released in the late 1990s and early to mid 2000s. Well, actually, the series has continued almost throughout to this day. And it's interesting to see the fact that it's really kind of set in this school and how it deals with some of the issues facing students and young people. So almost like kind of coming of age. And Netflix, they're very attuned in terms of who they want to attract. And certainly the younger crowds are a big part of their demographic. And I think that's really played out in terms of the success of the series.
Now, Dr. Carlson, since you're a member of the Zombie Research Society, why do you think zombies are good subject matter for story writers to use to depict issues in society?
That's a great question because, as Jason touched on, it encapsulates basically everything that's going on in a particular region or time frame. In addition, it allows the writers to capitalize not just on zombies, but it also allows them to capitalize on what's even more terrifying in that is the actual human nature, like the dark side, the really, really dark side about where, you pit a normal human being up against a zombie who may have been their wife, their son, their daughter, you name it, and then takes it outside the realm of it strips all social casts away, removes the money, removes the power, and then it allows them to portray just if you're in a situation where you need to survive with other humans, what are you willing to do in order to survive? And that I think is really what writers key on in order to make it terrifying, but also really hit home.
Yes, because people can, relate to it more. Now, what about you, Jason? The expression 기생수 refers to a certain beggarly spirit. Do you think the societal depiction of this notion worked with a zombie contagion?
Yeah, it does. It's quite a difficult watch, to be honest with you. It makes you feel very uncomfortable. I like the series somewhat, but I had issues with the way the way the director kind of captured some of these issues, not least the kind of the sexual abuse that takes place within the school. And it's interesting also how it kind of compares to like the film Parasite, and of course the title 기생충. It invokes this kind of this mentality that's sort of incredibly competitive and trying to climb up that social ladder regardless of the cost. And there's also Squid Game as well, and I think there's certainly some similarities amongst these series and films. In terms of the issues that they're conveying, and I think they do tackle some of these very, very pressing difficulties facing society and the capitalist society that we're living in. In some ways, it's enjoyable, but also somewhat can make us very uncomfortable while watching it.
Mm-hmm. Totally can understand what you're saying. Well, now to Dr. Carlson, do zombies evolve? Meaning, have they changed since they first emerged as a part of pop culture? And what kind of changes or evolution can we expect them in the future content development?
It's actually funny you asked that. I was talking about this with a friend the other day. You see as we talked about, you see the 1968 George Romero zombies, which were almost humanoid looking. You have them meandering about, you have them, basically you get that guttural noise, you have all of that. And then fast forward, let's just even say 30, 40 years, now you've got Resident Evil, now you've got Zombieland, they've gotten faster, they've gotten smarter, they've gotten more terrifying. You're introducing a whole bunch of different aspects when it comes to now they can jump, now that they can do all these higher level cognitive thinking, events. And now you go into Army of the Dead. And so now we're looking at the future because there's one scene in that film that you see the zombies can actually breed. And then they're in a casino and then Dave Bautista shoots one in the head and all of a sudden you see sparks. And unless you're looking at that really hard, you don't catch it. But now you're talking about robot zombies, which is really out there in left field. But you're seeing a massive evolution and much more terrifying evolution than what we saw from basically the 1968 kind of cartoonish, but it's the canon, to Resident Evil, where we all know it was a game and they made it kind of unbelievable, to now we move into, okay, now they breed and they're being mechanized. So I think that we're going to see a lot of things in the future that just build on that theme. It just really comes down to what's going to scare people the most and what's going to get people to pay attention.
Well, before we let you go, I want to ask a rather silly question. Dr. Carlson, you're a zombie expert. So when faced with a zombie, what should we do? And how do we win against a zombie?
Okay, so if you're talking about Western zombies, just walk around them, or smack them in the head and destroy the brain. However, if you're talking about K zombies, run as fast as you can or just don't even go outside. I mean, there's no point in that one. You will lose. But that's how in order to kill a zombie, you have to sever the brainstem or create massive trauma to the head. And again, if you're talking about K zombies, they can probably think at this point too. So you're out of luck.
All right, thank you for the tips. Well, I'm afraid we'll have to wrap up our discussion at this point. Thank you so much for making time for us, Dr. Carlson and Jason. It was a very amusing discussion. Look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.